Please welcome JPAC lobbyist Cliff Berg.
Thank you all. I want to start off by thanking you for being here and for this amazing turnout in Sacramento, which I think reflects the concerns and interests of our community. As a day-to-day lobbyist here, I can tell you I have not seen the expressions on members of the legislature's faces that I saw last night. The impact you make is tremendous, and it lasts all year long. I find myself often in committee hearings testifying in behalf of JPAC, and one of the things that I know is that your presence here today and last night ensures that when they just see little Cliff Berg standing there testifying on a bill, they're seeing all of you. And that fact that they know that you care is so important all year long. And the effects of the JPAC Summit last all year long. And I want to thank David, Helena, and the rest of the JPAC team and volunteers who helped make this and are responsible for making this happen. So I'm basically been charged with about 10 minutes, which is probably 9 minutes, to make you all professional lobbyists. My goal is at least to make you comfortable. And if you have any questions after I'm done, please feel free to come up to me. I'm going to be here and talk to you. So the first slide we have, at least I hope, is the legislative overview and setting the playing field. California legislature, 120 members, 80 members state assembly, 40 members state senate. A couple of numbers regarding them. Partisan makeup, super Democratic majority, over two-thirds in both houses, so the odds are you're going to be meeting most of the time with Democrats. But the real interesting number that I like to cite is 30% of this legislature was elected in November of last year, and it has been there less than 5 months, 6 months, and another 30% were elected 2 years before that. So 60% of the legislature that we're dealing with is JPAC, has been there 2 years or less, which means that, and we'll talk about that, the role of staff in the building, extremely important. The legislative session began in earnest in January and it goes through September. These legislators, whether they be new or there for a while, meet with organizations all day long. What I like to say about the JPAC Summit and the JPAC Lobby Day is they are used to meeting with organizations. They meet with groups all day long. You were there perfectly doing what everybody does, but the one thing about you that you're doing that most of the other groups do not do is that they are realtors, they're bankers, they're doctors. They're there on issues that affect their economic interests. You as representatives of JPAC are there to help your community without economic self-interest at stake. And that's one of the reasons why members of the legislature and the staff are so impressed and why they want to meet with you. The goal and the purpose of our meetings with members of the legislature and what I call lobbying 101 is building relationships and educating. Lobbying is never about arguing or confrontation. So sometimes in the lobbying business, we have to try to persuade someone to have our point of view, but we never take that attempt to persuade and educate to the point of any kind of argument or disagreement. How a bill becomes law in California, I like this slide in particular because it sort of gives a sense of the linear legislative process and how a bill has to be created, introduced, and then how that process is a subject of deadlines, Ledge Council deadline, bill introduction deadline, spot bill introduction deadline, policy committee introduction deadline. And as a level setting, you are here this week in May. This end of this Friday is the last day for policy committees in both houses to pass bills. Next step in the process for fiscal bills is the Appropriations Committee in both houses, then directly to the floor or directly to the floor if they're non-fiscal. They've had 5.5 months since January to introduce bills, consider them in the first house. They will finish up in the first house in June, kick them over to the second house, and that process has to be repeated before they adjourn in September. So a 5-month process in the first house takes about 5 to 6 weeks in the second house because they have a summer break coming up in July. So anyway, a sense of how a bill moves through the legislature. JPAC's goal, as I mentioned earlier, in lobbying and JPAC's approach to lobbying is you were there to help build relationships for JPAC. We encourage you in building relationships to focus on personal stories, why you are there, who you are, a little bit about your connection to JPAC, your connection to the Jewish community, your interests in the issues that are of concern that motivated you to come to Sacramento. That is one of the biggest parts of the goal of JPAC lobbying is to build those connections. Some of you are going to see members of the Jewish caucus who were here last night. That's important, but they're probably going to be, and most of them, for example, are co-authors of our ethnic studies bill. Meeting with a legislator from Bakersfield who doesn't have a Jewish community necessarily, or Shasta County, is an opportunity to educate and build relationships with members of the legislature who are not used to having those conversations and don't know that much about members of the Jewish community. I talked to a member last night at the reception who had never been to a Passover Seder, and she was from Los Angeles. So whenever our major goals are who you are, why you care, and if you can get that across, we are being successful. We have a slide that sort of gives a diagram of lobbying meetings, which has sort of got a lot of information in it. Obviously, a meeting has a beginning. We emphasize group introductions, introduce yourself, who you are, why you care. Divide up the subjects of who in the group is going to talk about which of the issues that are on your list and in your materials, and you'll be hearing a little bit later from our policy experts on those, but always be comfortable. Everybody knows you are here for a day of conversation, introduction. They don't expect you to be experts. If you get a question that you don't understand, know the answer to, my goal as a lobbyist is my reputation and my credibility. And so never make up an answer. If you get a question you don't know, say you don't know, but you'll either have Cliff Berg, your lobbyist, or David Bacarsley, your executive director, or Miller, your ethnic studies expert, get back to them with an answer. So don't wing it. Engage with the legislature. Read their body language. Most meetings at the Capitol are 15 to 20 minutes in terms of the amount of time you have. So you're going to have an opening of the meeting, you're going to have a close of the meeting, and given your group, you're going to figure out who's going to touch upon what are the issues. But the main part is you want to give everybody in your group an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about who they are, and work on that relationship building. Lobbying tips. Some of the do's and don'ts of lobbying. First one is really important. As I mentioned, many legislators are new. Many of the staff has been there for years. We're in a very busy time. This week is the policy committee deadline. Next week, the May revise is coming out, and we'll be into the state budget. Things happen in terms of how we've organized your day. So you may have on your calendar a meeting with a certain state senator or a state assemblyman. That will change. Members get called into committees to present bills. They get called into caucuses. They get called into budget briefings. So treat the legislator, staff member, as you would treat the legislator. They are just as important or more important. If they were a smart member of the legislature just elected in December, they hired a veteran staffer, and those staffers are the people who will recommend how they vote on bills, what budget priorities they want to prioritize. As a former staffer myself, and David is a former staffer, we would urge you, staffers are just as important as the member, so in no way show any disappointment that you're meeting with a staffer, and treat every staffer with respect. particularly the receptionists who, later in the year will say, hey, Cliff, why did you let those people in my office from XYZ group? Or they'll say, hey, really enjoyed meeting those folks from JPAC. I hope they come back again next year. So everybody on the staff, receptionist, scheduler, district director, legislative director, extremely important. Emphasizing, again, provide personal stories, be brief, however, and to the point on the substantive issues we're talking about. Read their body language in terms of, is it time for the meeting to end? And provide feedback to us on how JPAC and how the meetings went. Do not get angry or combative. As we talked about and emphasized, it's about building relationships, educating. We're going to have to go back to that member or that staffer again and again and again in the course of their work in the legislature. It is just not worth and doesn't help to get angry or combative about an issue. Don't talk about other legislators or political parties. Don't talk about politics. You are in a state office building. You are there on the JPAC issues that have been selected by your team at JPAC to focus on that are priority issues. I know many of you have other hats that you wear in your community and about issues that you care about, but you are there on JPAC issues today, and you are there on state business. So it's not appropriate to bring up campaigns, elections, campaign fundraising, donations. Those are things you just don't talk about in a state building or in a JPAC lobby day. And don't discuss other issues that you care about that may be important, but they're not JPAC issues. Before the meeting, you're going to have an opportunity to meet with your group and your group leader. Complete the lobbying meeting worksheet that you've been given, that you will be given. After, group leaders will work with you to submit a survey or responses to JPAC. We encourage you to take photos when you're with a member. They love it, and it helps build that relationship with that member. Send a thank you note after the meeting to the staff and to the member, all part of relationship building. We are now going to get into the substance of your issues, and I'm going to ask Miller to come up and talk about one of the issues that he has been working on extensively from probably 8 in the morning till 8 at night or later. So Miller, you want to come on up?
Good morning, Capitol Summit. I'm Miller Saltzman, Director of Policy and Partnerships at JPAC and Director of our Ethnic Studies Coalition. With over 60 organizations in support, we're excited to be working on AB 1468. We're working to ensure ethnic studies is implemented with accuracy and integrity and without bias in California schools. K-12 ethnic studies is meant to uplift the histories and cultures of Californians, of California's diverse communities. If done well, fostering empathy and understanding will lead to a safer society for all, including Jewish students. But without clear guidelines, a course meant to combat bias, in too many cases instead allows bias into the classroom. Unlike other K-12 subjects, ethnic studies lack statewide content standards, curriculum frameworks, and instructional materials, leaving schools and teachers without clear guidance on what belongs in the classroom. So this gap has led to the inclusion of factually inaccurate content and anti-Semitic narratives being taught to children throughout California, creating harmful learning environments for Jewish students. AB 1468 addresses these issues by requiring the state to develop clear standards, frameworks, and instructional materials that are free of bias and bigotry. The same academic infrastructure that exists for all other required classes. That's something to really keep in mind. All other required classes have clear content standards, frameworks, and instructional materials. It also introduces oversight provisions to promote transparency and opportunities for public input on the curricula adopted by school districts. This bill isn't about Protecting only Jewish students, another good talking point. It's about safeguarding all communities in California. Without clear, vetted content standards, transparency, and other protections provided by this bill, any group is vulnerable to misrepresentation, misinformation, and a compromised learning environment. This bill creates important protections for Jewish students and all students in our state. Now, many of you may know that this bill is in the midst of some robust negotiations. As a contentious bill, a lot of people have strong feelings about ethnic studies. Well, fortunately, because of our incredibly deep coalition, again, of over 60 organizations, and strong organizing, each of the other ethnic caucuses have agreed to come to the table, to work with us to curate and pass a strong bill to address our concerns about anti-Semitism in the classroom, K through 12. They have formed a working group that is discussing whether this bill will move forward as is or focus on anti-Semitism in our K through 12 classrooms. If done well, this can have an even bigger impact on the lives of Jewish students. And if it's not enough, we retain the right to move forward with the bill as is. So we need to keep pushing forward. And with this bill, we need to keep pushing forward with this bill to remind legislators how important this issue is to our community. But you can also share with legislators that you know there are negotiations on this bill, and it's an ongoing conversation between the diversity caucuses, and we would support the current bill or an iteration that addresses anti-Semitism in our classrooms if it's at least as strong as AB 1468. It's critically important that we stick to this message to really give us some strong leverage in our upcoming hearings. So thank you all, and you'll be hearing soon about a May 15th hearing that we'll invite you all to here in Sacramento. Now I'm excited to turn it to Morgan Blum-Schneider, Director of Jewish Family and Children's Services Holocaust Center. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Miller. As he said, my name is Morgan Blum-Schneider, and I'm honored to be here today on behalf of Jewish Family and Children's Services Holocaust Center and the California Teachers Collaborative for Holocaust and Genocide Education. For those of you that were in the session earlier this morning, you should all feel like you're experts and ready to lobby on behalf of SB 472. I'm going to share with you a few talking points to help reinforce that and for our colleagues that were in the other session. The leadership of the Jewish Caucus and advocacy of JPAC has been instrumental in advancing successful initiatives supporting Holocaust and genocide education. Thank you to Senator Stern for your commitment to this essential work, your continued leadership as we now work together to pass SB 472. This bill is driven from the findings of a statewide study that was spoken about in the panel this morning, issued by the Governor's Council for Holocaust and Genocide Education. Although Holocaust and genocide education was mandated and has been part of our educational code since 1985, a study that was released in December of 24 stated that only 26% of our California school districts are currently teaching about the Holocaust and genocide. This is an alarming statistic, and the vast majority of our California students are not receiving the instruction that they need, and that their teachers are not given the resources and supported with the pedagogy to carry these lessons out in the classroom. This study revealed that the teachers identified a lack of financial resources and a lack of professional development for the schools in giving their ability to carry out powerful curriculum. SB 472 directly addresses these gaps. I want to tell you a quick story about one school that has benefited from the systematic approach to Holocaust and genocide education, just to give you an opportunity to understand what the power of this bill could do. We were contacted at JFCS by one Jewish parent who was alarmed by a series of anti-Semitic incidents at their child's middle school. We were introduced to the principal. We began consultation. This principal then joined us with the California Department of Education for training here at the California Department of Education on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, together with 86 other district and school administrators. The relationship grew, and we were able, together with our partners at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, bring training to this school campus. We trained every one of the teachers, 67 teachers from this school received training from our two organizations, and more than 300 students at this school received specific workshops directed for their demographic and their content knowledge. I want to thank the incredible people in this room to make these programs possible. But this is one school, this is one case. This is a school that had resources, and this school had the ability to reach out to us. We're talking about a piece of legislation to reach every other school in California that does not have these resources and does not have perhaps a Jewish parent to raise the concern to our community. So I'll tell you about the two components of this bill. They're complementary. First, it directs the California Department of Education to authorize a survey. And what it first does is it sends out a letter to every local education authority, that's our schools and our districts. This letter would come from the California Department of Education stating what our current education code is, that it is mandated to teach about the Holocaust and genocide. The letter would include a list of resources, organizations, many of whom are here today, and the California Teachers Collaborative, as opportunities to help these districts reach this mandate. The other part is a funding bill, which would allow for these schools and these districts to access funds. So the ask with this bill is $10 million. These are grants directly into the hands of our schools and our districts to support substitute teachers and to support the ability for them to bring professional development to their campuses. And following this notice from the California Department of Education will be a survey. We will be mandating that each one of our school districts needs to report within 24 months how and what they're teaching about the Holocaust and genocide. This bill is essential in making sure that each and every one of our students receives the education that they deserve. Thank you for joining me in lobbying for SB 472.
Good morning, everyone. I cannot see a single thing from up here. My name is Ryan Nahari. I am the Deputy Director of State Policy for Mazone, a Jewish response to hunger. We were very pleased to join JPAC at the end of last year and very pleased to introduce two bills for consideration to JPAC for support. So I will be speaking about Senate Bills 225 and 411, which both have to do with childhood nutrition. Senate Bill 225 was introduced by Senator Jerry McNerney. Essentially, as of right now, during the summer when schools are closed, the National School Lunch Program allows children to visit various sites throughout the country to have a meal during the summer when school is out and they're at home. Presently, you have to be 15 years of age or younger, and usually a caretaker, a guardian, or a parent will take the child to get a meal. And in a very cruel situation, the child will eat and the caregiver and the parent is not given a meal. If the child is hungry, the parent probably is too. We know how expensive food is, and we fully believe in feeding as many people as possible. So this bill will allow for additional funding where we're already giving meals, which are at libraries, food banks, parks, to give a meal to that caretaker so that child and the caretaker can eat that meal together so we can reduce food insecurity in California, which impacts 1 in every 4 households. I also wanted to mention Senate Bill 411, which was introduced by Senator Sasha Perez. Currently, California participates in summer EBT, which is $40 per month for the summer, which is given to parents to spend funds for their child out of school for the summer. It is a very difficult application process for parents to actually have to submit their application to the school district to process this card. This bill will create a one-stop shop for these parents to submit this application so that they can actually get summer EBT. The website will also have an additional list of resources for anti-hunger. Just so folks know, 6 million California students qualify for summer EBT. 4 million of them will automatically be enrolled every year. We still need to get 2 million enrolled manually. So this will be of a great assistance to get that done. And it will also provide additional meals during what we saw unplanned closures, such as during the wildfires, as well as regularly planned closures. So thank you all for lobbying on these bills. And now I would like to introduce Catherine Schneider from Jewish Family Service LA. Thank you all so much.
It's an honor to be here. This is a fabulous room of people, and I know your lobbying experience is going to be really impactful. I want to talk to you today about the Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program. Back in 2022, the state put in its budget $36 million over 3 years to help take care of our survivors. That funding is expiring this June. 50% of our survivors here in California are living below the poverty line. What this funding does is provide home care, case management, access to food, transportation, and more. It allows survivors to remain in their homes and in their communities. I hope that I don't have to tell you that for many survivors, moving into an institutional setting would be a personal catastrophe. The care that they receive is culturally appropriate, it's trauma-informed care, and it's linguistically appropriate because not all of these survivors are fluent in English even now. What we have seen is that as survivors age, their medical needs increase dramatically. And for the first time, we're meeting them and hearing from them. Over the past 3 years, agencies across the state have seen more and more survivors come forward. Some are on wait lists and are not receiving the care that they need. We are asking this program to be continued for an additional 3 years, $36 million that's spread throughout the state. This is the time to help this group of people live in dignity. They are a symbol to us of the worst that can happen, but also of resiliency, and they remind us and give back to us, especially in our complicated moment today. Thank you so much for advocating on a group of people. You are their voice now, and it will make a tremendous difference. Thank you.